the Earth might not be existing in a form that we can find habitable in, 50, 60 years.
You've made it to Not Billable, the Lawtrades podcast that brings you bite-sized legal and business news updates, full event replays, and conversations with legal pros about what's going on behind the scenes every week. Stop the clock, put the timesheet down. It's time to get started.
Hey everybody, I'm Oren Peleg, back with another episode of Not Billable, joined, as always, by my good friend and law traders extraordinaire, Matt Margolis. Matt, how you doing, man?
See, the hands. We all talk with our hands, don't we?
We do. And I grew up in the era
in the law,
of Barney, of Sesame Street, where hand gestures, that's how you do it.
I just think if you are law or law adjacent, you have to be able to use your hands to express everything. So, as I'm watching myself now on camera, I'm like,
couldn't agree with you more.
All right, let's get to the next story.
All right, so let's take a look at what we're talking about this week. So this week we're going to start off with big oil, not only reaping major benefits and major profits from 2022, but major scrutiny for their handling of climate risk. We're also going to be talking about Hermes, which is kind of like a legendary haute couture Parisian fashion house. They're embroiled in a suit over some NFT stuff, so we'll talk about that. And then finally, SBF. We haven't heard from him in a while, but he's been playing kind of fast and loose with VPNs and text messages and all that. So we'll jump into that. Some of the smaller stories. It just got a little bit harder at Perkins Coie to get your year-end bonus, so we'll talk about what's going on there. And finally, an interesting story about the connection between Super Bowl ads and Kirkland Ellis. So that'll be fun. But let's start with the big oil. So, as many of you know, Shell, BP, Exxon, all these major big oil companies have been reaping record profits from 2022. But now an environmental law firm called Client Earth is suing personally 11 board members of Shell, saying that they're mismanaging climate change risk and violating, or I guess breaching company law by doing so.
That's so interesting. Are they saying that there's a violation of the Paris Accords? That's where it's fascinating. I'm speaking strictly in a legal sense and not in a moral sense, because I do agree, but not agree that that they're breaching the duty of the shareholders. I just morally agree that we should be cleaning up the earth.
Well, in a statement, Paul Benson, who's a senior attorney with Client Earth, stated, "The shift to low-carbon economy is not just inevitable, it's already happening. Yet the board, speaking of Shell, is persisting with a transition strategy that is fundamentally flawed, leaving the company seriously exposed to the risk that climate change poses to Shell's future success, despite the board's legal duty to manage those risks."
I got it. So I think this is in the UK, but if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening to this and you're an attorney in Europe, but I think the duty, so in the United States, the duties that we have are the duty of care and duty of loyalty. I'm pretty sure it's very similar. So they're saying probably a duty of care, where in the event that all of these things occur and the earth does not exist, Shell could not make profits because there's no one left to buy gas or no cars to drive or whatever. So I get the logic. It's definitely an uphill battle, but it's admirable. I respect it because, I agree with their message here. The Earth might not be existing in a form that we can find habitable in, 50, 60 years. So
right.
Hats off for taking the shot, but legally, I don't know.
Well, this is the argument I feel like that so many make about publicly traded companies. It's that the short-term profits and the short-term reward to shareholders is kind of the focus of the company, and not kind of longer-term things that need to be done. And so it doesn't seem to me like if I was a board director for Shell, theoretically, I'm not going to worry about something that's going to happen in 2050, right? When that's well beyond my time, or what? How?
Yeah, no.
Are they supposed to be regulating themselves? Is it supposed to be, others coming in and stepping in? The government's coming in and saying you need to start focusing on green energy. It's an interesting question.
Well, you run into this weird spot because as a director, your duty is to the company and the shareholders. So you're trying to maximize profits for the shareholders, and you almost can't even look. I understand the logic, and I think the logic should be employed that hey everybody, I want to, I know I'm supposed to bring you X amount of dollars or maximize profit, whatever, but we cannot have a profit if the earth doesn't exist.
Right.
And that really should be the thought process. I agree with that 100%. As kind of warped it is, it's almost like this warped logic to get to the right conclusion. Because it should just be like, morally speaking, like we should make sure that the Earth survives, and that everyone lives in an environment that that's habitable. But I do think that probably the government getting involved, where directors are like, I'm just complying with government regulations. I'm just complying with what the government has said. Look, I've complied with my relevant duties. I'm not breaching any duties to whoever. And I do think that's probably the right call, especially in these industries where they are making record profits, unbelievable profits.
Billions. Well, I'm kind of interested.
All of the energy companies absolutely crushed it this year. I think.
2022 was profits. Off the charts. Yeah, and it's interesting to me also that it's like the directors are getting sued personally, right? It's not Shell as a corporation. It's Mr. X and Mrs. Y getting sued personally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tactic. That's a tactic to employ, and it'll still. It's almost like the same thing, because you're still going to trigger. It's either it'll trigger an insurance policy, a directors and officers insurance policy, or the company has agreed to indemnify and defend any of the directors for anything within the course and scope of their work as a director. So it's almost like a symbolic hit, right? You're going after the directors, but at the end of the day, Shell is the one that will always be paying out. Shell or an insurance company for Shell will be paying it out.
Yeah. So it's going to set an interesting precedent, whatever way this goes. But I guess the stakes couldn't be higher, right? This is literally the future of our planet.
I gotta say, I respect the move. While I don't know how legally strong it is, and why I kind of doubt the strength of the lawsuit, we got to do something. I mean, the Earth is not going to survive, another period of time like it in its present form. I guess it is only going to get worse, and companies that are, moving in that direction, right? Where we have energy companies that are basically pushing forward still fossil fuels and things of that nature to the detriment of the Earth. So, more power to you if you're willing to take a shot.
Yeah. All right, well, let's shift from big oil to fashion. So Hermes, which is,
Yeah, I didn't expect that. What a deviation that is. You gotta at least give me a better transition than that. You gotta tell me, maybe like a cute joke in between.
I got no jokes here. All I can say is that we're pivoting to haute couture. Yeah. So I don't know if you've heard of Hermes, which is kind of one of the highest, kind of top tier fashion brands out of Paris. They're famous for their Birkin bags, all sorts of leather goods, whatever. So there is an artist, an NFT maker, however you want to call him. His name is Mason Rothschild, and he produced 100 Meta Birkins, which is NFTs that kind of riff on the Birkin bag. Well, Hermes wasn't so happy about that and sued Rothschild for these Meta Birkins, saying that it was an infringement of IP. Well, they won, but Rothschild is not kind of taking this lying down. He's appealing, saying that, hey, if Andy Warhol can make Campbell soup cans and everybody calls that art, why can't I make these NFTs of Birkin bags? And what's the difference here?
I get the point. I think I understand that completely, right? And because that classic Marilyn Monroe and it's just variations of Marilyn Monroe. So I understand what he's saying. But this is such a rip of the Birkin. It is and I do understand the argument too that it's brand dilution, right? I think this is the Lantham Act case where, you create you flood the market with this Meta Birkin, these, and you're oh, maybe it values the brand. Where you're I've got thousands of these Meta Birkins eventually, right? I have no clue what the long term goal is. And now all of a sudden it cheapens the brand where you're oh, well, I've got these digital Birkins. I don't care about the real thing, right? Granted, I think the market is shifting. I don't know if it's actually shifting in favor of NFTs, so maybe that's not entirely accurate. But I at least understand the legal rationale here. But again...
Or at the very least, if I make Birkin bags in reality, in IRL Birkin bags, and you're going to make them online, and you're going to get money from that... that's money that I should
literally
be making.
Profiting from my IP. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
What if Hermes wanted to make Meta Birkins?
Right. Then what?
their Birkin. It's their IP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Vogue
You know what?
Business.
I'm gonna make Meta Birkins.
I'll join you. So, Vogue Business has said that the center of this case is something called the Rogers test. Now, in the late 1980s, Ginger Rogers, who was a major Hollywood actress of her era, sued an Italian filmmaker for basically stealing her name in a movie that he made called Rogers Astaire. So something called the Rogers test has appeared, and that's kind of like how a lot of trademark cases are now decided, is if does it pass the Rogers test or not. The Rogers test saying that if trademark has no relevancy to an artistic work, or if it's like blatantly misleading, then it that's the muster of the Rogers test. So this is something that, the jurors in this case said this does not pass the Rogers test. And, yeah.
It'll be interesting. And I think you're going to, I tend to agree. And I fully expect if it went the other way, or depending how the appellate process proceeds, you could have someone making the Meta Nike, the Meta whatever, and just ripping these iconic brands and these iconic, things. Like it could be the Meta Jordans. And that's ridiculous. You're complete. I understand the argument there, and I think it makes complete sense to me on the Hermes side. I want to clarify something because I think my brain is scrambled. I think I said Latham, like the law firm, for the act. If you're listening to this and you're an IP attorney, I am sorry. I did not. That is not the correct pronunciation of that act. It's Lanham Act or whatever. I know I'm gonna get roasted on Twitter for that one. All right. We can move on. Thank you for letting me caveat that one.
So we're going to move on to SBF, who, for whatever reason, just keeps messing up what he's been, his case that he's in. So he's under house arrest in Palo Alto at his parents' house, and it appears that he's been using a VPN to text or email with people, to access all sorts of documents. He's been using, encrypted and disappearing messaging services like Signal to talk with his general counsel, Ryan Miller, to maybe do some witness tampering. We don't know. But the U.S. attorneys have now sent a letter to the federal judge who's overseeing the case saying, hey, what's going on here? We can't have him, erasing evidence. We can't have him witness tampering. We can't be doing all this. We got to tighten his bail. We got to stop him from using the VPN. Do something here. And the federal district court judge, his name is Lewis Kaplan, has said, yeah, that's correct. Stop doing this, SBF.
What is happening in this case? Every turn, I hear something different that makes me cringe and shudder. I do not care about the legal, the actual legal processes. I think the last one I heard was he blamed his attorneys for forcing him to file for bankruptcy, and now he's probably, his attorneys are like, hey, chill out, don't do these things, and he's like, yeah, whatever, signal text. I don't know what else to say. It's almost like you have to shake him and be like,
right,
why don't you care about this?
Which is, his parents are Stanford law professors. You would think that being under house arrest with two Stanford law professors is nobody like, yo, chill out. Don't witness tampering is not good in this situation. There's billions of dollars at stake here.
Don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm using the VPN to watch Netflix. I want to watch Netflix in Japan.
Wasn't that the argument? Wasn't that the argument?
I think it is. I actually do think that's the argument where his lawyer's like, oh no, he's using the VPN so he can watch something on TV. Come on. And the fact that if you're an attorney, you have to make these arguments. Granted, maybe it's true. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe. But even the fact that I have to even explain to the court why my client is utilizing these methods that historically are used to circumvent, any sort of order stopping you from talking to certain kinds of people or certain people in particular. Stop! I don't want to be in that situation.
Just the juxtaposition of the fact that we have some of the top Wall Street firms, some of the biggest names in business, billions of dollars of international money at stake, and this 30-something, 20-something year old kid who's playing with text messages and using QuickBooks, and just the juxtaposition of like high and low brow stuff here and just what's going on is so wild to me.
It makes no sense, and I want to get to the other part of this because it makes me laugh more than anything about the fees. Let's talk about the fees because I think we had an off-camera conversation about this because we thought So Sullivan is CNF is the firm for SBF in this bankruptcy, is the bankruptcy attorneys, and they have. Let me clarify that they're not the attorneys for SBF, the attorneys for the bankruptcy.
FTX.
They have, I think, they have spent in a month. What is it, like $9 million
in 19 days?
You tell me.
So
in 19 days.
So in the 19 days that Sullivan and Cromwell was hired for bankruptcy proceedings in November, they charged $9.5 million for 6,500 hours billed across 151 staff. Now, that is only 19 days in November. We are now deep into February, so you can imagine how many hours they've racked up since, but that's what's come to light so far. Now, Sullivan and Cromwell has said that they've only charged a discount for senior staff, right, for their top partners, and are only seeking 80%
only $2,000.
Right, and are only seeking 80% of the total bill for November, which comes out to just $7.5 million, but staggering figures.
$7.5 million. This, and it's so funny, the justification for the bill. I'm sure they're doing great work, right? I'm sure they're doing great work. I'm sure there's mountains of documents. They have all these e-discovery attorneys going through everything. I get it, but that is such a staggering amount of money, especially in a bankruptcy where it's not a traditional bankruptcy. We're talking about a massive potential financial fraud and the likes of which similar to Enron. I mean, that's what's been claimed by the receiver. Or whoever's running the show right now, the trustee. It's so much money. It's so much money when everyone else is owed equally an outrageous amount of money. So it's crazy to watch like one thing go up while the other goes down.
And you had mentioned something about the cost of meals on their own?
Oh, I think meals, I think there was a news story recently where the meals were something like $20-something thousand, maybe $21,000, $23,000.
Which, you're not buying Subway sandwiches. Like, what?
I mean, if you are, that is such an outrageous number for food. Granted, if it's like 150 folks working on this, I guess meals can get very expensive, but it is so hard to comprehend sending a bill, and in the Excel sheet, right, in the invoice, it says in a little line, lunch, $21,000.
That's over $1,000 a day if it's for
Absolutely.
19 days. Yeah.
I hope they're full. I hope they're full. I hope the meals were filling and they were delicious.
I hope the meals were delicious. Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear what crazy story we're going to hear next about this case, because we've been talking about this now for a few months, and every time we talk about it, it's more entertaining than the last time. So I'm looking forward to the next thing.
For the future, I am frightened. I do not know what's next, but I am holding on for dear life to see what happens.
Yeah. Wild. All right, well, let's transition to some of the smaller news stories. So Perkins Coie, which is a big law firm, they just reported, or they just told their associates that if you want to get your full bonus for the year, which, by the way, we're already 5 months, we're already halfway through the year, the fiscal year, which started in October for them. If you want your full bonus for the year, you're going to have to bill more hours. It just went from 1,950 hours to all of a sudden overnight 2,000 hours you need to bill to get your full bonus.
So they added another 50 hours. I like this. I think the justification for... Oh, wait. Let's clarify. This is for this year. Like, this isn't like, hey, next year we'll call this year a mulligan, right? This year, you have to add another 50 hours, which let's add some layers to this. We are in an economic recession, as much as folks don't want to call it as such. Especially if you're a deal attorney, this is a frightening proposition, right? Like, oh, wow, I have to add more hours where maybe my workload is already low. As a litigator, it may be a little bit easier, but again, we don't know what the workloads are looking like because things are slowing down. So that's frightening. Two, you're right, you're in the middle of the year, you're like, all right, I'm on track, and now all of a sudden you're not on track. You're all of a sudden not on track for it. And I think the justifications for it, now granted, this is from Above the Law, I think the justification in Above the Law was like, we had given you these big salaries or these salary raises, and we've received nothing for it, effectively, as the firm is saying. Like, you got to bill more to make up for the fact that we've raised your salaries. totally. I mean, like that was your choice, management, to raise salaries, like to justify. Oh, okay, now we have to raise everyone's hours. After the fact, after we've had great booming years, just because there's this, because things are starting to slow down. I mean, it's crazy. Granted, it's 50 hours. Let's do that. Make sure 50 hours over the course of how many more months we have left in their fiscal year. We've got
7.
7 is not that much. I think it's more principle than anything.
Right.
But
does this leave a sour taste in the associates' mouths, right? Like, if I'm working at Perkins Coie and all of a sudden I get this from high up, am I just like, yo, what's going on?
I'd be
right?
pissed.
Like,
I'd be pissed. I would be pissed. I'd be like, I'm going to hit it. Like, I'm going to hit those hours, right? Or, again, if things are slow, I'd be, like, really pissed. But if I'm on track, I'd be like, yeah, I'll hit those hours, because 50 hours over 7 months is not an outrage, is definitely not outrageous. But just the fact of the matter is, it's like, I'm working hard. I'm doing what I have to do. And this should be, like, next year. This shouldn't retroactively apply, where all of a sudden, like, I'm in the depths of work, and I'm like, all right, we got to add another hour today because of this. So, I'd be pissed. I'd be pissed about it.
Yeah, not a fun situation. Not a fun situation. Yeah. Well, let's talk about then the final kind of minor story here, which is an interesting parallel that Bloomberg Law has drawn between the cost of a 30-second Super Bowl ad since 1985 and the average profits per partner at Kirkland Ellis have pretty much stayed tied together for those last 4 years. So, huh?
How weird is that?
It's wild. So I guess in 1985, a 30-second Super Bowl ad cost $525,000, while Kirkland's partners earned about $405,000 each from their profits. Now this year, those profits are $7 million and $7.4 million respectively. So they've been in lockstep for the last 40 years.
It's such a weird statistic, or such a weird like the fact that someone at Bloomberg was like, let's chart these two things. What are two things that have nothing to do with each other? Super Bowl ads, Kirkland Ellis partnerships out. Oh my gosh, I can't stop laughing. If you're the one at Bloomberg who figured this one out, that's hats off. It's pretty funny. I mean, it means nothing, but it's super funny.
But I wonder if it might mean that, like, is there any sort of like, if there's anything that can be drawn from this, right? Like the value of what's going on.
Can you imagine if Kirkland's like calling like the NFL or whoever has the media rights, like Fox or something, and it's like, hey, what are you charging this year? I'm like, hey, we're charging 7.8. I'm like, all right, hold on a second, guys, up it. We got to go up some more. All right, everyone's now getting 7.2.
Yeah, it's cool though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Good stories, man. I appreciate that last one. That one made my week from here to here, especially because it's Valentine's Day. So actually, it's probably closer to here.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad the stories brought you joy. And thank you as always for talking me through these, and to everybody for listening.
Thank you, Oren.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out also on LinkedIn and Twitter to keep up to speed with what we're doing. Catch you on the next one.